Hi BC, it's Rob here with another video, and this is a contest entry for David Newton. So David's reached 200 subscribers and his birthday is on the 10th of February, so he's running this contest till the 9th of February. And it's an interesting challenge, pretty challenging. Pick your favourite 5 albums starting from the 1970s. I'm not sure why he's not included the 1960s, but you know, there weren't that many good albums came out in the 60s anyway. So let's get cracking. The 1970s, quite a challenge for me. Sort of the 1970s is probably thought of as the album decade, really. Obviously a lot of sort of progressive bands releasing albums in the 1970s, but I'm giving those ones a miss. Towards the end of the 1970s was when I really started to get into music. This is an album that I didn't actually buy when it first came out, but I bought it subsequently in the early 1980s from a Manchester band, and this album came out in 1979, and it's Joy Division and Unknown Pleasures. So this album came out, like I say, 79. There's only about 15,000 copies of this album when it came out. There's no description whatsoever what's on the album. Coming from Manchester, I was like 14, 15 when this album came out, so I'm not going to sit here and say I was into this album as soon as it came out. I wasn't really aware of Joy Division until Ian Curtis's death in 1980. But I've become a huge fan of this album. There was no singles released off it, but to me it just sounds like you listen. There's something about Manchester. At the end of the 1970s, Manchester was not a hospitable place. I mean, I can remember going down Manchester and it was like in and out. I didn't feel really safe there. It's not like now when you go into Manchester and there's bars open all day and restaurants and stuff like that. It was a pretty grubby place. I always felt quite intimidated when I went to Manchester. A lot of good record shops though, so I used to get down there and get back before it got dark. But yeah, this is a dark album, moody. It's just what Joy Division sound like. There's some bands that you just think, I'm glad, I'm not obviously not pleased how things ended for Joy Division, but they just did those 2 albums that are perfect for that time. New Order were a totally different animal. The first album, Movement, does sound like Joy Division, but gradually as we got into the 80s they really got their own sound, but this album certainly stands the test of time. She's Lost Control is probably the most famous track from this album, and Joy Division suffer from me a little bit as, oh, they're not, how do they rate as your favourite bands, because they just didn't release enough material, but certainly one of Manchester's greatest bands. And this is a great album. So yeah, favourite album from the 1970s is Unknown Pleasures by Joy Division. Now, the 1980s is a difficult one for me. So many albums from the 80s that I love. I'm having a bit of a renaissance with the Smiths at the moment. I said probably 6 months ago that I'd stopped listening to the Smiths, but I can't show a Smiths album because my son's got them all. I can't even find the CDs, but the Smiths the Smiths was such a massive part when I was 20 years of age. I absolutely love the Smiths. All the albums, Strange Ways Here We Come is definitely the weakest album. All the singles, I bought them as soon as they came out. The Smiths were a massive band for me. But this album just pips it. It's another Manchester band. This album came out in 1989. And it's the Stone Roses, so a bit of a Manchester theme here. John Leckie produced. I mean, I was at the right age when this album came out. I was 24, young, free and single, enjoying life, going out in Manchester a lot. The swagger, Mancunians have a bit of a swagger, and the Stone Roses certainly have a swagger, an attitude. They look great, they sounded great, and this album's great. Ticked all the boxes for me. Every track just flows seamlessly. I Want to Be Adored, She Bangs a Drum, Waterfall, Made of Stone, I Am the Resurrection. Just a classic. It's an album I never tire of. So yeah, another Manchester band. I had all the t-shirts, all the 12 inches. Again, a little bit like Joy Division. They couldn't really, for a different reason. I know they had a follow-up album, but nowhere near as strong as this. And they've sort of reformed and done a little bit of touring. But Ian Brown, John Squire, just a great band. And yeah, great album. So yeah, favourite album from the 1980s is the Stone Roses self-titled album. Now, going into the 1990s, and I'm going to have to show a CD because I can't find this album on vinyl, and if I do ever find it, it's going to cost me a lot of money because I never see it in the wild. Quite apt really, and it's Wildwood by Paul Weller. So this album came out in '93. It's got the most boring CD you're likely to see. But for me, even including the Jam's albums, the Jam probably did 3 great albums, Armand Cohn's being my favourite. The Style Council probably did 1 great album. But for me, this is Paul Weller's best work. After the Style Council were dropped by the record company and they split up towards the end of the 80s, Paul Weller really was in the wilderness. As a big fan of him, you know, I was waiting and waiting, and it seemed like for an eternity. And his solo album came out in '92, and it did sound a little bit like the Style Council. I think he was trying to find his way. I went to see him in '92, and he was apologising to the people in the audience because we didn't really know any of the songs, but you could see there was just something there. And this came out in '93, just before kind of Britpop. Paul Weller is like a lot of artists. He writes his best material when his life's in turmoil. And at the time, when Paul Weller was in the Jam, he was in a long-term relationship. He was a vegetarian. He was living life pretty clean. And in the Style Council, he met DC Lee, who ended up being his wife, and he had kids with her. When they split up, he sort of had his youth again, and he was mixing, partying. Britpop was just starting, and this album sort of for me kind of started Britpop in a way. Every track, Wildwood is one of my favourite songs. Sunflower, The Weaver, Foot of the Mountain. Just a really strong album, and I'll always say it's my favourite Paul Weller album. And if you don't have anything by Paul Weller and you want to dip your toe in, it's pretty folky, this. Really strong songs. Just, I've always loved it, I always will. So my favourite album from the 90s, sadly I don't have it on vinyl, is Wildwood by Paul Weller. Now, between 2000 and 2009, my favourite album, I'm going to utter the immortal words of, I've never seen anyone show this on the VC, and it's this album by a band called Hal. So Hal are from Dublin, and they released this album in 2005, and it's great artwork. And I think I've mentioned before, this is what the Beach Boys would have sounded like if they came from Southern Ireland. It's the harmonies, the sound, the production, everything about this album. It's a real hidden gem. It did get critical acclaim when it came out. You know, it did win awards in Southern Ireland, but I'm not sure what it was up against. but it's just such a hidden gem. I had the CD for years, but you know, a couple of years back, I was on Amazon I'm always putting HAL into Amazon to try and find it, and it popped up, and I got it for quite a good price. And if you're not aware of HAL, and you want to listen to the Irish Beastie Boys, every track on this album, really nice melodies. I saw them in 2005 and they were great live. They have released an album, I think they released it in 2012, never actually listened to that, but this album I always reach for, whatever mood I'm in. It covers all the bases, so yeah, self-titled album from 2005, and it's by HAL. Now, my favourite album from the last decade is a bit of a challenge as well, because there's so many albums over the last few years that I've loved, but this is an album that I really obviously do like, and it's Little Fictions by Elbow. So this came out in 2017, and Guy Garvey, I've said, he speaks to me like no other singer. He's like he's just singing to me. Some of the lyrics in his songs are so poignant, and being a band from the Manchester area as well, maybe that's something to do with it. Every album by Elbow, you know, stands up for me. They do have little peaks and troughs like every band, but when this came out, I was really into it, and I'm still really into it. I'm still discovering it. All the vinyl and music that you listen to, but every time I reach for this and play it, you know, I love it more and more. It's a strong album. Elbow are, you know, they are really well respected in the UK. Sell out arenas, very popular. I don't think in America they're as popular, not as well known. But yeah, really recommend checking out Elbow, and this is a great album. So yeah, Little Fictions by Elbow. So those are my 5. Really fun contest, real sort of challenge as well. It's one of those contests that you could get up tomorrow and pick another 5, but for today, those are my 5. If you're not aware, Davy's channel, like I say, just reached 200 subscribers. Been on the VC probably for similar time to me. Good guitarist. He's been in bands in the past. Really good channel. He's mainly into guitar music. Does like a lot of British music, and I always enjoy his videos, and he always seems to enter lots of contests, so a pleasure to enter this one, David. And yeah, his birthday is on the 10th of February, so if you want to get an entry in, then I think you've got about 11 days. So that's it from me. If you've got any comments about my choices, what are your choices? Love to hear from you. I'll always get back to you. So that's it from me. Bye for now.